Okay, next up, we have Keane actually, who is previously from a AAA studio, and then an indie studio, and then a AAA studio again. So Keane worked on the Darwin Project, and as a game designer. And the Darwin Project is by Scavenger Studios. And then afterwards, he joined Riot Games Hong Kong and Singapore studio as a senior game designer. So today his topic will be about ideation. For those of you who are stuck on games ideation, he'll be talking to you about the thought process that went through Darwin Project. So I will give it up. Let's give it up for Keane.
Hello.
Hi, Keane. You want to share your screen?
Sure. Let me find out how to do it. Yes.
At the bottom, yeah.
Does it work? Okay, sweet. Hello everyone. My name is Keane. Today, I was happy to be able to share this talk with you. It so happened that I heard there was a slot available, and I took it up to be able to present this presentation that I have ready actually. So let me quickly go through a bit of my background again. I actually come from Singapore. I graduated from NUS to begin with, from the Faculty of Arts and Social Science, Communications and New Media. And then after that, towards my fourth year, I took a course. It's the same course that Sean mentioned earlier. So it was the DigiPen Ubisoft Campus program. And in this program, I think I was in the third batch, which I think arguably is the best batch because we have a lot of cool people like Sean. Then and after that, we created a game that served as my first portfolio. So with that, I applied to a bunch of other game studio, and including Ubisoft Singapore back then. So I think it was in 2011. So I joined Ubisoft Singapore as a tester for Ghost Recon Online. After that, I move on to the Assassin's Creed brand, where I work as the technical level designer for the underwater feature, which is a new feature in Assassin's Creed Black Flag. After Assassin's Creed Black Flag, I move on to Assassin's Creed Unity, where also the time anomaly modes that are in the time anomaly rifts in Assassin's Creed Unity are also done in Ubisoft Singapore. It's also a new game mode kind of thing that I participated in and prototype a bunch of this, what this game mode could be. So after these two Assassin's Creed game, I move on to the big IP that we are all excited to see how it which is Skull and Bone. So on this IP, I work on because it being a new IP, I once again work on a bunch of new stuff like the world system as well as the multiplayer game modes, what these things could be. And a couple of years into this project, a friend that I work with, he is actually a bit of a consultant and a creative director for the part in Assassin's Creed Unity. He invited me to go to Montreal, and that's where I flew to Montreal from Singapore, and I worked on this game that I'm going to share today, which is a Darwin Project. And 3 years into that, right now I am in Hong Kong and physically working on as a design lead for the initiative that we have in Riot Games Hong Kong and Singapore for the card game, Legends of Runeterra. So these are a bit of my sharing of my background. So it's today's talk. Actually, I try to like hard fit it into the topics that I hope will be interesting to you guys. But say if the topic is not very interesting, feel free to also ask a bit of my experience, and I'm happy to share if I am the power to share it. Okay, so today we're going to talk about this game, Darwin Project. So I have a screenshot of it. This is the state of the game during PAX East. That is 6 months into production. What is Darwin Project as a game? It's about Hunger Games in winter. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea on what Hunger Games in winter could mean. Like what does it mean? What's the gameplay like? So 10 players, they battle it out inside a snowy arena. The last one standing wins. There is also a show director that's casting the match. So this guy, his role is not necessarily to win, but to make the fight entertaining for the people watching and try to direct the battle and encourage conflict to happen. There's also audience participation. So this is the part where if you're watching the game on on Twitch or Mixer, which is no longer there, but press F for Mixer, and you are able to actually influence the gameplay. Like when the show director calls for like which ask the audience to vote which zone they want to close. As a viewer on Twitch, you can actually vote. The show director can also like ask for a particular player to be manhunted, and this player will, everyone will know where he is, and if he survives, he get a reward. But if he gets killed, then the person who killed him get the reward. So this part can also be subjected to audience vote, and the audience can even call down a nuclear bomb on any part of the zone. So those are very interesting things that the audience could participate in. So let me see. So the game right now is available on all 3 platforms, on PS4, Xbox, and of course PC on Steam. It's developed by Scavenger Studio, and we also self-published it back then. And I tried to look them out. I think they are an incredible group of people and developers. Like the founders, Simo Davu and Emily, are very dedicated and good people. So look up what they are doing, and if their new projects interest you, maybe you might also keep an eye out for them. So on Steam also, the recent reviews of our game has been quite good, which is very surprising. Like to get a very positive, we hover around the 90% mark. So which pretty much in raw terms, like for every 1 bad review, you need to have 9 people who back you out, which is not an easy feat considering that it's classified a battle royale game. So, and also the game is slower in terms of production, but when matched against the other battle royale, it's actually quite encouraging things for us to still see a very overall positive review for our game, because if you look at other battle royales, game review is generally not as good. We also once hit the #1 spot on actually I have a worry that something might go wrong. Let me check the chat for a bit. Okay, good. Okay, let me go on. Okay, sweet. We hit the #1 spot on Twitch. So this is while we have an invitational that we invite a bunch of streamers to play, and this is also concurrently when Ninja, the #1 Twitch streamer back then, is playing Fortnite. So it was nervous for us, but eventually we overtook Ninja, which makes us feel quite happy and accomplished. So as mentioned, I try to retrofit this talk for everyone in this in our chat. So everyone who loves the game design and thinking about new things. So it could be a new school projects for students, or games, or for developers, or new features that you want to pitch. So for students, and indie and AAA developers, each of you might have a very different part that this talk might relate to you. Like maybe when I talk about how aggressive we have to do things, maybe that part indie might relate a bit more. Or when I talk about like how to plan for the long term or planning, the AAA part might relate a bit more. So hopefully it's helpful to you guys. And the last part is game designers in general. And I also a firm believer that everyone is a game designer regardless of your role in the game industry. So hopefully this will give you all some ideas to start thinking about. Yep. Okay. Let me go on. Okay, so the title of this talk is Instinctive Approach to Game Ideation. Generally, it tries to answer the question like what to do when there is no existing reference to your game idea. So it's a bit high level kind of overview and a few tips and tricks, but it's not. I'm not going to share like the entire process or the entire do this and do this and do this. It's just a few of my experience sharing on how this approach can be very interesting when you want to start making a game. So when it comes to the instinctive approach, what it is. So #1 is really a data-driven kind of thing because this data-driven approach is very powerful when it comes to a game that is already out in the market, and you can use that to generate some ideas on what you want to build in the future. But when there is no existing reference, it's hard to empower yourself to be able to find the data, and sometimes the data can be just hard to find. It's also obviously not an ideas guy kind of thing that you have an instinct that there's an idea and you just need someone to code it. So I'm not trying to teach you how to sell snake oil to people. So that's one thing to discuss. It's not a random process. There's a methodology that we try to structure. And it's also not an accident that the game arrived at where it is. Like a lot of it is about a lot of thinking and planning on how we get there. So I listed 3 high-level points for us to direct our attention to. So the agenda we will discuss is fantasy informing gameplay, how to follow the fun, as well as how to front-load the fun, and what does it mean to front-load the fun. So once again, it's a little, it could be a bit high level, so don't, and also a bit of my personal experience, so a bit of disclaimer here that, yeah, that I will just say to begin with. So ideation, fantasy needs to inform the gameplay. So a lot of us have ideas, so now I have an idea and I want to make a game. So how to, a few things that we did not do when we try to like sell this fantasy to other people. So as mentioned, we trying to compare with another game with differences is could be not efficient approach because first the culling was one of the early reference for Darwin Project, but if we were to compare ourselves to like on the trade show when you try to explain to a consumer what your game is and you try to say use the culling as a reference, as a comparison, if the person do not play the game, then you have to explain what the game is, so it's not very efficient. And also, if you try to explain it with a lot of these differences that are not gameplay related, say it has a different setting, it has a different art, it has a different voice actor, it once again doesn't really punctuate the point. And finally, if you try to explain it, and sometimes they'll just focus on the differences, like if we compare the game, they just focus on differences and not the core of what your game actually is. The other thing that I advise not to do is when you pitch a fantasy that doesn't explain gameplay. Like this is an example of another battle royale called the Reticle Heights. They try to pitch a very similar vibe to Darwin Project actually. Like all these game show, reality TV show, like you can spin to win, there's prize room, there's cash prizes. And actually, when you play the game itself, all this is just it's going to be a shooter, and all these are just like loot box mechanics. So it doesn't seem to explain the gameplay. Like there's a fantasy and there's a disconnect between the fantasy and the actual gameplay, and you see that in numerous other types of projects. So that's one thing. The other thing is keeping things vague and in the air so that we can iterate. So in this case is whereby the game director, sometimes they will weaponize iterate, right? Like he actually did not know what the game is about. So he asks you to go and try these 2, 3, 4, 5 things. And then we'll be like, okay, I know that when it's fun, I know it when I say it, and ask people to iterate. So in general, there would be no clear direction to follow. And that's also another trap, and try not to do that. So try not to try not to keep the fantasy vague. Try to be a bit more specific when it comes to this kind of definition. And finally, once again, I'll jump back to comparison. So earlier I mentioned about comparison with a game that is less popular. So this part is about comparison with a super popular game. Say we compare ourselves to Fortnite, and this part is even is also quite dangerous because they will compare it, and then to the gamer they don't actually care that you're a small indie team with like. On Darwin Project, when we made it, like at some point we have like 12 developers, including like everybody, and it's a very small team. So when you compare to $1 billion production, obviously gonna fall short. But the gamers don't actually care about that, and they also don't want them to compare the difference. Like I mentioned, we have 10 players, and Fortnite has 100 players. So if they focus on all this difference, and like Fortnite has guns, you guys don't have guns, it became a very difficult comparison and difficult to sell your idea. So my most recommendation is to try to sell the idea based on what the fantasy actually is. So a bit going back in time, I actually share the experience of how all this idea come about. So in July 2014, that was when I was working on Unity, right, I mentioned. So we went on a vacation with a bunch of people, including my future back then boss, Simo Davu, which is a founder of Scavenger Studio. And we have some blue sky ideation on the beach in Bali, thinking about like what could truly innovate the game industry. Like we had to start to think about all these interesting things. So the inspiration that came about was also the thing that a couple months before that, in February, there's this Twitch Play Pokemon phenomenon. So we do know that there is this phenomenon about spectator interaction that is underexplored. How many years ago? 6 years ago. Yeah, this phenomenon of spectators. But then Twitch Plays Pokemon opened our eyes to the thing that okay, spectator watching people, okay, watching the game doesn't really need to just be a passive spectator. They can also actively influence the game itself, which is the inspiration that we start thinking. and then trace back a bit of human history, like thousands of years ago. That's actually the first recorded, probably, history of spectator interaction happening in video games. So we have the Romans gladiators combat, where in this case, the gladiator, they are fighting, and then the audience can choose to thumbs up or thumbs down to determine whether the guy live or not. So as a gladiator, you are fighting, but you also have you don't just need to be good at fighting, but you also need to be good at getting the crowd support and become a crowd favorite. So that ideally they vote thumbs down on you and thumbs up on you, and then you survive, and then you can fight another day, kind of thing. So this is pretty cool. So think about it, that is inside the human DNA. And also there's also Hunger Games the movie, right? So the game itself, the book itself came out a few years before that, but movies truly brought it into pop culture, especially when we, in the Western audience, and even the China, when we actually during PAX East, there's some old middle-aged Chinese ladies that speak Mandarin and not English. They somehow see that there was a trade show and they come in, and they too understand what is a 饥饿游戏, the Hunger Games, the show, because it really brought it into the pop culture. So it's also a very clear reference for us to decide how we want to build this game. And therefore, when we try to sell the game as a Hunger Games in winter, it is a very powerful weapon, because people immediately will be able to get what your game is about. They know that as a player in the game, you are trying to survive, you are trying to survive, gather resources, maybe you make some weapons, you fight with some tools, try to hide, try to find other players, and try to survive the arena, because the arena is also controlled by this show director, and the show director role is to make the game entertaining. And so once again, we can start to think about what kind of abilities we can start to give the show director. And moving on to the show director, then we also know that there's spectator interaction, right? Like in Hunger Games, you know that the spectator watching, they can try to deliver like health package to the participants, and to try to help them, or to help the people they like. So as participants, the idea of trying to make yourself the crowd favorite became very clear. So the next part is in winter, and this part I truly only get once I go to Montreal. Like coming from Singapore, you know what winter, like 30 degrees outside, but once you're in Montreal, it's minus 30 degrees, and it's a world of difference. Like in minus 30 degrees in this kind of setting, actually you don't hear anything. It's deafening silence. Like all the insects are dead, the leaves are frozen, so when the wind blows, there's no sound. So it's a very cold place, and you start to be able to truly visualize some gameplay elements. Like you know that your job is to keep yourself warm. So how do you make a fire? How do you find a cabin to go in to hide in order to survive? So it once again became a very good fantasy. When you say Hunger Games winter, you can think about the gameplay of the characters. You can also start to think about the environment the character needs to survive in. And very early in production, we hire an art director. He used to be from comic books, and he don't actually play a lot of games. He's Simon Leclerc, and he's actually super good. So one of the skills he has is that in the concept art that he started to do for us, a super early concept art, like it's not a super highly polished one to try to sell the game, but just an early concept art of what the game could be, and some of the elements we want to start thinking about building. So this is a few that I'm going to show a few that I really like, and you look at this, you can start to imagine what the gameplay could be. You saw that there is two characters that are in this winter setting. You see a guy in the foreground walking towards the background, and you see like is the guy in the background trying to ask for help, but why is the guy in the foreground in a very defensive position? He's holding an axe as if he's going to attack. Why is it so? And then you look at the guy in the background again, although he's like waving, but you seem to see there's a tripwire. So is he like trying to lure him into a trap kind of thing? And then there's also like lights, camera to show that it's like a show, TV show. So overall, the concept art do let us try to eventually inform the designers like me and the level designer, which is also me, to decide like how can we start to build this level. Other things that he did just to share around is like you look at this scout camp thing. Once again, it's a very strong concept art. You try to tell us like the settings it can be in. So there's like a very primitive camping ground as well as some technology parts to highlight the era. And you can see how, as a level design, we can design a hide and seek gameplay around this kind of setting. There are a lot of places to hide, to put resources for people to scavenge, and all this kind of thing. So hide and seek gameplay became a core pillar of how we're going to develop this game. And also even more settings, like we talk about a lot of our trees, but what about other types of settings? So we can think about a frozen river. So this is, I actually like this a lot, because the frozen river with this ice wave, they don't exist in real life, but it became a very, it does highlight to us how can we design this kind of environment to look very treacherous, although it's a bit fantasy, and make it look like a very fun arena to try to fight in. Yeah. As compared to a flat frozen lake where there's no obstacles, it's like a few times less interesting. So I really like to see this kind of art when it comes to trying to conceptualize what the level could look like. So moving on, to sum up a bit of this section is that the fantasy that we create, be it in terms of like the idea pitch, the reference we draw from in order to pitch it, and the concept art, the early stage concept art, they all inspire and inform what the gameplay could be. So this is what you see is what I get, right? We create this beautiful setting. There's a forest where the players could go in and start to scavenge for resource to use to survive in this setting. There's a lot of hide and seek gameplay when it comes to the obstacles we can create, be it the trees or the landmarks or the camps or the cabins. Also, it being a forest make the axe a very clear tool that we need to develop. So with the axe, you can use it both as a tool to harvest resources, like make wood to make fire. It can also be used for combat, like using axe to slam into an enemy became a core combat mechanic for our melee combat. And the winter itself lend itself to a very good gameplay mechanic, which is first, you know that you need to make fire to survive, and also the winter have this snow that you will want the player to walk in and you leave behind footprint, and both of which lend to what we will pitch as the manhunt gameplay. And in the manhunt gameplay, it means that when you make every action you make in the game allows other players to find you easily. So it's a mechanic that we can have to encourage conflict. So you know that the game tried to make you cold, and when you're cold, you make a fire. But when you make a fire, you saw the smoke, and every players around you, they'll be able to see the smoke and know that, okay, there's one player in this area, and they can come and find you. And when they approach you as you're running around the level, you leave behind footprint. So through tracking the footprint, they can track you down and try to hunt you down and kill you. So it became a way for us to encourage combat and make the gameplay a lot more active. So all in all, the whole picture I'm painting is very coherent, and we know what the gameplay could be. So moving on is the prototyping phase, which led to my next point on my agenda about how to follow the fun. So a bit of vocabulary distinction, right? Like there's a difference between finding the fun and following the fun. Finding the fun actually implies that you do not know what's fun, right? Like this is it means that, like, okay, I don't know what's fun about my game yet, or what's interesting. I'm going to find what it is. But following the fun is a technique that actually is highly, this part I learned a lot from Simo Davu. He's the one that pitched this technique. So when it comes to following the fun, it's really about knowing what's fun and guide your prototyping process to rapidly iterate and distill the experience. So you notice that these elements, the few elements that I pitched in the slide before that, those are very fun part about your game, and you direct your prototyping process to quickly find the best part. So a bit more towards my my area of focus is like level design. So we begin a very early effort to try to distill what's the most fun part about a forest level design. This part is a bit similar to like when in Assassin's Creed, right? Just running around the town and level is already fun. So obviously we don't have the same animation system when we try to make this thing. So what is it the most fun that we can make, and what's the most micro level of fun that we can create? So we actually managed to discover this 2-second rule. So a bit of what it's about is that when you're running through a forest as a human, or maybe when you're in the game, there's this 2-second reaction window that is very key to give you the adrenaline pumping feeling as you're running through the forest. So in this setting, imagine that as you're running through the forest, you saw a tree, and then you dodge the tree to go left, and then there's another tree, and then you dodge the tree. So every 2 seconds, you go like turn left, turn right, turn right. Okay, there's another tree. Okay, go and pick it up. There's a resource. Go and pick it up. The timing is just right. As compared to 3 seconds, it's a bit too long. Like when it's 3 seconds, it goes like you run, and then 1, 2, 3. There's something. 1, 2, 3. Something else. something else. So if you do the counting yourself later as an exercise, you realize that 2 seconds is a sweet spot, 3 seconds seems a bit too long. And with that, with the Unreal Editor, we can use the foliage tool to just define the settings and just paint the forest across the level. And that became the first playground for us to start designing levels. And the players can, in this level, start scavenging for resources, look for enemy, try to pay attention to their surroundings, and engage in this hide and seek gameplay, which is very powerful as a very first step on where the fun starts. So with that in mind, we start to boom, create all these beautiful levels. So the first level outside of the forest setting is this construction yard. So using this construction container, it became another tool for us to do this navigation gameplay that we think is very good. Then the similar forest setting, we don't need it to be winter. We design an autumn towards winter kind of thing. This map we launched in autumn in Halloween. So it's actually have a very creepy vibe to it, which is very cool. There's a graveyard. There's also a farmland, and overall the level also looks equally beautiful. Then towards Christmas, we start to make this lava level, which also it's also a very inviting level with all the Christmas lights that we start to put on the trees, as well as a very treacherous lava thing. So now you can knock your enemy into the lava, so there's a new environment element to play in. And finally, one of the last few levels that I made before I left was the city setting. So it's actually a very, if you compare to what I did very early with the forest and compared to the kind of attention and work you have to do to build a city, the city is much more difficult and quite time consuming to make. So it's one of our later level for good reason, but it's also adhere to some of the principles that we will try to do when it comes to the density of the navigation we want to create when it comes to the level design. And when we create all this level design, now we need to put them together, right? So we also designed the tile mapping system. So this is a system where we, with the help of like a very capable technical artist, Thibault, we designed this system so that we can cut out a lot of this different part of the level, and then we try to piece them together, and then we rotate it randomly. So at the start of the match, you actually don't know where you are, because every map we try to make it different by a system. So in a way, it's a tool for us to make a level faster. So when we create a new level, we don't need to produce a 2 by 2 kilometers level. We can design just a 500 by 500 meters level that we can cut and paste and generate new level every time the player play. It also support a lot the Hunger Games fantasy, where in Hunger Games, you don't have the contestant memorize the map, and every time they join, it's the same map. You have them, every time they join, there's this thing that they don't know where they are, then they need to adapt to survive. And a lot of this also fit that. So in this session, when I talk about follow the fun, I begin with like, we find what's the granular fun of the thing, and then you try to follow it, and eventually you arrive at something that fits also the fantasy. But what I'm trying to describe in high level is that we don't actually start with this, right? We don't start with the angle that, okay, we need a Hunger Games fantasy, we need a tile mapping system that the map has to be different from game to game, and therefore, due to production concern or fantasy concern, we need to build this thing first, without actually finding out what's the smallest part you want to build to lead to this end result that is satisfying. So a bit of it is also related to the next point, which is actually, yeah, I didn't explain the next point super well, so I changed the title. Initially, it was Keep the Eyes on the Road, which means that as you're building the game, you have this end fantasy that you want to build. But along the way, as you're driving, there's a lot of these little things that you can pick up and learn. Like as you're driving this highway from Montreal to Toronto, for example, you know that you want to arrive at Toronto eventually, but if you can't just say that the game is Toronto. The game is actually what you see on the road as you're driving, a lot of the little things that you pick up along the way. So it's a bit high level what I'm saying, but in short, it means to front load the fun. Like when the players play your game in a demo, they don't really want to know what your end fantasy is, but what they're actually holding the controller and playing right now is the most important thing. So when we start prototyping and make this prototype in, I arrived in Montreal in October 2016, and that's when we start a bit of the production for the demo, which is 6 months later. And we start to put the first bunch of things using custom assets into the level to get started with. So we have a very tight timeline to adhere to, like we need to finish this quickly. So what are the strategy we use to get there? So as mentioned, is to front load the fun. So the player needs to get to the fun part of the game super quickly, right? Like once again, there's no excuse that the game will get fun after 10 hours, or the game will get fun after they appreciate how deep it is. They will get to appreciate the strategy when they unlock the talent tree. The talent tree, they can mix and match all this combination. All this, it doesn't matter, right? Like you need to just front load the most fun part of your game and create that emotion quickly. So obviously the other things we talk about, like UI elements, just make sure that the things like make sure that you have the proper UI and tutorial inside the game so the player know how to play your game. That's also important. But a bit of the things that I've been pitching, so having the micro decision making, like having this 2-second rule that makes the game fun to play in, just running around is already a interesting mental exercise for the player. The manhunt gameplay is one of our key innovations. Some of our reference back then was things like Rust or DayZ, especially like DayZ, this kind of the early predecessor of Battle Royale. A lot of the gameplay is very passive, like you're encouraged to camp rather than find other players to fight, because if you fight, you might die and then you lose the game. So we have this manhunt, which encourage active gameplay. You can easily track down when you're cold, you make a fire, other people can find you. Similarly, you have this footprint that you can find other players. And once you engage in demo, so when you are playing the demo, you don't just wait there and do nothing. As you're running through the level, you see a footprint, you try to follow it and just get into combat and start fighting. So that's very good. Third-person camera is also very good for spectatorship. Like a lot of our reference that I mentioned earlier, they are all like FPS kind of game, and a lot of it is first-person camera. And also, if you attend game design school, right, a lot of what we try to do is this thing about you are playing as a character and trying to, you are the Hunger Game contestant kind of thing. And a lot of game design classes just pitch that, okay, if you want the player to feel involved with his character, you need to be first person, so you feel like he's the person. But actually, when you prototype it, then it's not right? We have third-person camera angle, which is good for two reasons. First is that the player actually is okay, I just said one reason. The other is too difficult to explain. The one reason is that as a spectator watching someone demo the game, like I was you're in the trade show and you see someone playing another game. If you look at it from a third-person camera's angle, it feels like you are watching a movie or you're watching a character compared to you are watching a first person. So it actually helps spectator understand the game better. And this is also important once the game go live on Twitch, right? If your gameplay is third person, to me at least, I feel like it's more fun to watch a third person character running around than a first person. That was just a feeling, but actually it works well for our trade show, which is quite important. And finally, the explosive combat design with knockback. So we need to start to design a combat system. So we choose not to go with a shooter, and combat will last a bit longer. So we have this idea about this knockback where we have the X combat. So when it comes to melee, when you're fighting each other, when you hit someone, he gets, or even with an arrow, right? You hit someone, they get knocked back, or if they parry each other, they get knocked back. So this knockback mechanics is also very powerful to create a very granular gameplay moment, because once you're engaged in combat, when you get knocked back, it can trigger your fight or flight response decision making. Whether do you choose to re-engage to fight, or do you choose to fly and run away and fight another day? So with this knockback, you try to make the combat more interesting, as compared to if without a knockback, right, you just rock the guy and then he died and then it became a different kind of thing. It's less interesting. So we designed that with this specific purpose. And also the knockback mechanic also make it fun to watch like an anime. So as you're watching someone play this game and with all this knockback mechanism and all this trick shot with the arrow, it feels like you're watching an anime battle. And that is the kind of feeling we try to go for. So I forgot the slide actually. Oh yeah, okay. So the overall it was quite successful. When we first present this thing at PAX East, the crowd became our best ally. We managed to gather a crowd around our booth, and it created a problem whereby the enforcer tried to tell us that, okay, you can't have so much crowd at your booth. Ask them to go away. They're like, what? I'm here to promote my game. You ask me to ask my people to go away. But anyway, it became a thing. Like people are interested to gather and watch your game, and it became your best ally. Like you can, once they start watching, a lot more people become more capable and they start to gather around. And also when they watch your game, they become your best ambassador, your best evangelist to try to tell your games to their friends, which is very good. As well as like after this PAX, actually I hang out with a bunch of Singapore game dev, which is hosted by Christophe Nazume, the founder of BoomZap, and Ian Gregory, a bunch of people are there. They invite a bunch of their influencers to hang out for dinner after PAX, and I hang out with them, and they too, although some of them did not play the game, but they too realized that, okay, there is this Yeah, I know Darwin Project. There was a crowd there. It was too crowded. I cannot see, but yeah, I remember that game. Yeah, so people do remember things like that. So it's actually very important for you to strategize your demo around how can you gather a crowd around your booth. And one of the technique, of course, you just publicize, just tell all the famous people and that you know that are attending the show. So this is in Pet South, so I invite Trump. So he came and it was very nice for him to come, and then he helped to gather some of his fans to notice our game. And also invite casters. Like you saw that you noticed I've been like droning on, and I'm not actually a very good hype person. I'm not a good presenter. So hire casters, pay them a salary to come and sell your game for you. Especially for game like ours, there is a show director. So you look at the back of there's a Bicycle Warriors, a very good guy in Mixer, and he is not he's very charismatic. So when he tries to cast the show, it's very entertaining to watch, and he will try to engage the audience, and he do a very good job at this kind of thing. So if you can afford, try to do something like that. And also we organize live tournaments. So as we demo the game, each game lasts about 30 to 40 minutes kind of stuff. And we can organize live tournaments so people can come and play the game, and we have the winner, and then the winner of each game come back at the end for final tournaments. Yeah. Okay, so overall, it's successful. We win a bunch of awards where we present E3, blah, blah, and then the media loves us and they know what to write about us. So when it comes to the headline, you see Darwin game, Hunger Game meets Twitch, competitive survival game. So it became a very powerful tool for us to engage the media and have them know what your fantasy is and be able to write the things that you want them to write for you. Yeah, so it's very good for us eventually. So Road to Life, I added this couple of slides so that in case because the original presentation is only 20 minutes, so I try to explain longer to fit the time. I also add a bunch of slides. So this part is a bit disclaimer. Like I don't feel confident talking about all this, but because it feels like towards the end I still don't know what I'm talking about. So as you see from this funny screenshot. Which, by the way, my Twitter is also in dark mode, like a normal person. This is a screenshot I found on the internet. So I'm going to share a bunch of things. So Road to Life was a very interesting experience. Once we made the game, we create a bunch of content update schedule. We also have a lot of live dev stream to share our development process with the audience, and this is the part where my communications and new media things come in, like how do you engage social media to spread word about your game. And also a bit of it is that at some point we did hire someone from Riot Games to join us, and she also gave us some very good tips on how to do this kind of thing. And one of the things she shared is that in Riot Games, she shared that actually every game dev is like a community manager. Like we also are the spokesperson for the game you are making. So that became also a good inspiration for us as to how we try to engage our fans and try to give them tips and give them tips on how to play the game, or what are the design process behind making these things. We also started add a pet, just like how in Riot, you go on Twitter, they always put like Riot something something as their name. We also try to put Scav something something for our name, so we are known as the Scavengers. So it became a good branding thing that we tried to do. And also we organize a lot of community show match and tournament, invite famous people to play our game and broadcast them on Twitch, and that became a very good hype tool actually eventually. A bit of things that we didn't do quite well. One of the things I like is that the association with Battle Royale, to me at least, right now I'm feeling post-mortem, is that it wasn't very good. Like a lot of things I pitched earlier about, you describe your fantasy with as little word as possible to punch in the point. Battle Royale back then became a way we can punch the point. And it does lead to a few different concepts people could have. Like in PAX East, we have but then there was still a concept of Battle Royale. So people actually compare our game with Overwatch. You look at the art style, it does look very much like Overwatch. Actually, towards the end of my production, Blizzard tried to hire us or me to be their level designer because of the art style looks very similar. And then moving on to E3, where Battlegrounds came out and PUBG. And that was the first time we tried to, okay, let's ride on this wave. Like our game seems to loosely be called Battle Royale, so let's call ourselves a Battle Royale and promote our game. And towards the end, like in Fortnite came out, right before we launched, Fortnite became the big thing. And we have to, now we are associated with this brand, we have to compete with them. And in a way, it's very difficult because when people do that, they start to compare your games, right? Like they see that your game has only 10 players, but Battle Royale has like 100 players. It became very strange to try to compete because like, okay, your game seems to be a small mini Battle Royale, seems to be less big, less grand, less massive. And that is an association that you actually do not want. So Battle Royale is actually a very loaded term, so we weren't that careful back then, and it cost us a bit. The other thing that also tangential and related is that during these events, I often have a questionnaire and I ask players like how much they think this game costs. And based on this reference, you can see a trend, right? Like in Overwatch was like 60 USD, so back then people think our game is worth like 40 USD kind of stuff. When it comes to PUBG, they start to think that our game is worth like 15 or something like that. Then when it comes to Fortnite, when you ask the same question, they think that your game is worth free to play. So it does, this kind of price anchor do associate with the genre you try to tag in. So try to be careful when it comes to this kind of thing. The other thing is survival bias. Like as we are making the game, where I talk about follow the fun, right? People that are fans of your game. Okay, this part once again, I'm speaking out of my comfort zone because I still believe in follow the fun, and that gives us an experience that is very, very good. So, for example, when you see people who love your game, when they start to post on Twitter what they like about your game, you try to take that and try to make that even better. We have like top 100 showdown, and this is a screenshot I grabbed literally yesterday, and they were like, okay, this was fun. It was a sick experience. So what we did was in a way correct when you try to follow the fun. But there's a survival bias. This idea that people like your game, they post your game on Twitter, and it became an issue whereby if you try to design by Twitter or design by social media, you only take those ideas from people that already like your game to begin with, and you tend to lose some ideas on people that you could have missed, like opportunities that you could have missed for players who drop out of your game. And this is the part that a bit of like AAA experience try to think about how they can do market research and try to cap that part of the market. Yeah. So this is also one of the slides that I added recently, inspired by one of the design presentation I watched yesterday. And it talked about this book, right, called The Future and Its Enemy by Virginia Prospero. And there's this concept of dynamism versus staticism. And they're both about progress, but dynamism is really about enterprising, unpredictable, and there's a lot of experimentation, try and error when it comes to progress. And this is a bit the idea I'm trying to pitch right now, that the way we are trying to go through this instinctive approach to try to sell a game and try to build this prototype is a lot of experimental try and error. But there's this staticism idea, which is a lot of process. So you have a lot of due diligence, a lot of check, a lot of paperwork, a lot of approval process. And in short, these two things, right, the contrast, right, the binary contrast feels like a bit of indie versus AAA, a bit about, and both are about progress. And when it comes to game development, it's worth looking at this book and start to get some inspiration on how can we fit in a bit of the opposite point of view into a process to create a more dynamic process. Phew, okay, I think I'm going to finish my presentation. So to end off, I have some brainstorm prompts for us to start thinking about. So if there's any ideas you want to pitch that has no existing reference, start to think about like how will you pitch the idea to inspire gameplay. Like with bonus, like with as little word as possible, pitch your fantasy to that most importantly inspire gameplay, and not just say like I want to make a mafia fantasy and then what does it mean to play as a mafia? You need to know that. Can you identify the key gameplay mechanics, and then how will you prototype? How will you follow the fun to arrive at something at the end? But most importantly, the first immediate steps to prototype, try to identify it. And how will you front load the fun? Say you want to demo in a trade show. Besides this one key gameplay mechanic, what are some peripherals that you want the decision making to come into, and front load the fun part of the game so that players who play your game understand it immediately in the trade show. So summary, what does it mean to fantasy-informed gameplay? Fantasy that's unclear and has no gameplay direction is useless. How do you follow the fun? Using rapid prototyping and iteration process to track down and distill the best part of your game. And to front-load the fun, the game is not necessarily what it could be at the end, but what is the player actively holding controller and playing right now. So front-load it and make sure that the player have the best experience. Yeah. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I think I end at a good time. And also add King of the Hill. You can find me on Twitter. So in case you don't get to ask the question you want or you're a bit shy, you can message me there. Yeah.
Thanks, Keane. I love how your talk actually has really tangible tips on going about for the ideation process, because it is to be, even for me, it was like really, really good post-mortem of your game, and also the the processes that you went through in point form, it makes it very easy to understand. So kudos on that. Okay, we have one question actually. So as us, if you are an indie dev working on a project, is it better to do the social media marketing yourself, or is it better to hire an outside company to do it?
That part, it depends. For us, actually, a lot of us are veteran, and especially coming from AAA, sometimes the AAA studio do give our devs some media training. So if you know all that, is good. It's a good head start for you. But in the initial part, we do hire outsource. In called there's this person we hire called Elizabeth. She helped us. No, Elizabeth. Yes, I forgot her last name, but she helped us in the past East period. So she has all the contacts in the press, like who to talk to in Kotaku, who to talk to in The Verge. She has all these contacts, and it's more helpful than you doing yourself. So if you can afford to hire like one consultant, is very helpful because they have the contact to do all these social media stuff. Eventually, towards the late part of the process, you actually want a good community manager. So towards the end, we have this super bubbly and cheerful and super enthusiastic woman called Sam Quino, and she's our community manager, and she take care of all the social media posting, all the Twitter, and she knows today is like the happy puppy day kind of stuff, and then she start taking pictures of puppies and put up there. As game dev, you might not know because you're not in the field, you don't know all these things that people try to do in the social media space to try to be relevant and be on top of the meta game when it comes to social media. So towards the end, it's definitely good to have an expert that know all these things and do it for you. So it's a bit of both lah. Like initially, if you can't help it, try to read out, try to get yourself informed. It's not a topic that intuitively you can get into. It's actually just to get into, you need to have some basic knowledge how to do it. And then once you are into it, eventually you hit a bottleneck where the pro can do it better than you, and that's where you decide it's worth like consulting or hiring a pro to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think a lot of us game devs are quite introverted, or we spend a lot of time in front of the screen. Like, we really seldom use apps like TikTok to really maximize our social media presence. So, always good to hire somebody who's familiar with all these platforms. Okay, Grayson asks, what are some examples of game design process learned in Darwin Project that's brought forward to designing Legends of Runeterra?
Well, I mean, in general, there are two very different games, but but the things that I brought forward when it comes to like prototyping and trying to get a prototype to the hands of the player is actually very good. So in a way, when I describe Riot Games, or actually specifically like when we talk about Legends of Runeterra, the team is actually, I feel like they have a very strong indie culture. Like the people, they still approach game dev more like an indie than a AAA. There's actually a lot less process and a lot of when you compare to traditional. I mean, it's all about relativity, right? So there's still some good process that we follow, but overall there is a idea that people are receptive to ideas. So a lot of the techniques or the way I've been trying to share about how do you pitch an idea or how do you prototype it so that you can give that prototype to the game director to play, or to your team to play, or to convince your programmer that okay, we should build this thing. So try playing it first. Is it good? Okay, let's build this thing. It's still very relevant. So yeah, just general prototyping tip and general philosophy tip on bias to action, bias to follow the fun, bias to trying to pitch your idea in a very direct way rather than this thing is that thing that nobody knows what is it you're talking about. Just give them a tangible thing to play, and then that will help a lot when it comes to designing in a big team like Legends of Runeterra. Yeah.
Great. I hope that answers Grayson's question. I think we've reached 11:50, so thank you so much, Keane, for your time and giving such a great talk. And thanks, the audience, for the question.